Hello, this is another Doctor Who review. I'm getting obsessed with these, I think. This one is a first Doctor episode adventure that I want to review. It's the Sensorites. There we go. Which, as you can see, that's William Hartnell over there. So first Doctor episode. One of the very early ones, because he's still with the original Tardis crew with his granddaughter Susan and her two teachers Ian and Barbara, and they're gallivanting around the universe. This is the first episode that is officially set in the future. There are other episodes, like when they go to Skaro, the planet of the Daleks, for the very first time, which you kind of assume are in the future, but it never definitely says which century it's in, or at least which Earth century it's in, if you see what I mean. Whereas in this one, they explicitly say this is in the 28th century, so in the far, far future, but not on Earth. The TARDIS arrives, quick summary and a few spoilers, unfortunately. The TARDIS arrives on an Earth spaceship, and initially they think the crew are all dead, because they're just sort of slumped there. But they rapidly come to realise that they're unconscious in an induced trance. And long story short, it transpires that the crew have been placed into this trance state deliberately, not with medication or drugs, but with a form of mind control, a sort of telepathic suppression to keep them entranced. And it's the creatures that live on the planet that the spaceship is floating in the, well, not in the atmosphere, but it's sort of floating in the orbit around the planet, which is called the Sense Sphere, which I have to admit is quite a weird name to give to a planet, the Sphere. But well, why not? Different alien cultures might have alien ideas about appropriate names for planets. And living on the Sense Sphere are the Sensorites, who are one of the weirder sorts of aliens that the design teams have come up with. They are very humanoid looking, but all of the ones that you see on the screen have the appearance of being little old men. They've got these huge big bald heads with wispy white hair and wispy white beards, and very sort of frail builds. So even the ones who are referred to as Sensorite warriors, they're not kind of big swaggering Conan the Barbarian types. They also look like little old men. You never see an obviously female Sensorite, which could be, of course, because we're a very gender stratified society where all the men are in one area and all the women stay at home or whatever and are seldom seen out. Or, of course, it could be, which is another possibility, that in the Sensorite species the females are virtually indistinguishable, to humanise at any rate, from the males. So maybe some of what look like little old men with big bald heads and wispy white beards are actually little old women with big bald heads and wispy white beards. Not all species have gender dimorphism where you can obviously tell the difference between male and female, so who knows, who knows. Or perhaps this is a single-sex species. Maybe they reproduce by some other kind of route rather than human styles of reproduction. But they're an odd-looking kind of frail, doddery old man species, and they're referred to several times throughout the adventure as being very timid, very gentle. They're afraid of the dark because the structure of their eyes, they don't even have eyelids, and they're very light sensitive, or I suppose we should say very dark sensitive. So they like to live in the light. They don't like being in the dark. They can't see properly in the dark, and that becomes a bit of a plot device as the adventure unfolds. They are perhaps, or at least the impression is given, that they are naturally telepathic, but they have this device, a kind of circular thing they press to their foreheads, which enhances their telepathy considerably so they can project over a great long distance. And it also means that whereas without the disc they can sense what others are thinking, they need the disc device in order to project out their own thoughts, their own ideas to other members of their own species, and it transpires to humans. And so the first part of the adventure is this kind of mystery as to why are the Sensorites preventing this spaceship from landing? Why are they keeping the crew aboard this spaceship in trance-like states? One member of the crew has even gone a little bit insane as a result of the mind control. It's affected him badly. So if they're hostile, why don't they destroy the spaceship? Why don't they just blow it out of the skies? Why are they keeping it in this state? And it's all a little bit of a mystery. Spoiler. It transpires eventually that these are not the first humans to have approached the sense sphere, and the previous humans turned out to be very mercenary, very unpleasant, and caused a lot of deaths, and had discovered that there was this very, very valuable mineral in enormous deposits all over the sense sphere, molybdenum, which they can sell at gargantuan profit, so that very first batch of humans to arrive there were eager to depart the planet, go back to Earth, get commissions from, I suppose, mining corporations or whatever, and come back and mine the living daylights out of the sense sphere, strip mine all of the molybdenum, probably leave it as a complete festering shitty slag heap, the way humans tend to do. Throughout history, we go to a place, grab everything worth having, and leave it as a right tip when we leave. And understandably enough, these Sensorites don't want their planet being plundered and reduced to chaos and a mess. So they had participated in the destruction of the original spaceship, but they are, because they're a very gentle species, they don't want to just blow up and kill these new people, but equally they don't want to let them go home to Earth because of the likelihood of history repeating itself. So they're keeping them in this sort of suspension, almost like a prison state, prison ship, this hulk floating around the planet that's not allowed to land and it's not allowed to go back, but the Sensorites do come up and they provide food and drink and what have you, so they're kind of like prison guards. They look after the humans on this, what has become a prison ship. The Sensorites also appear able to exist in space without a spacesuit, at least for short periods of time, because there's a very brief scene when a Sensorite peers through the window of the spaceship and it's got no helmet on or any other kind of breathing apparatus. It's just sort of floating in space going, oh, hello, through the window of their spaceship. How long they can stay in space without mechanical aid is never discussed or revealed. And they do have really weird feet. I should have mentioned the weird feet. You very briefly see, I presume it's very briefly because it would have been so difficult to walk in. I'm sure the camera angles were kept up for the rest of the show to stop the actors tripping over their own feet. But on the brief occasion you do see Sensorite feet, they're huge round discs, and they're almost like kind of flipper type things that they go up and down in, which are quite entertaining to look at, if not terribly practical for the actors, I'm sure, to have been walking around in. Other aspects of the adventure that develop, Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, turns out to have telepathic ability. Well, it's known that she does have telepathic ability anyway, but it becomes more pronounced, more exaggerated on this visit to the sense sphere. And it gives the actress a chance to do more than just kind of be a teenage girl figure in the background, and she starts to rebel against her grandfather. She starts to want to do her own thing and go off and act independently. So she's having that sort of teenage separation phase of pulling away from family, saying, well, I know what you want me to do, but this is what I want to do. And then there's the clash of the generations. And it's a kind of a foreshadowing of her eventual departure from the series at the end of the Dalek invasion of the Earth, when she falls in love and goes off with a man she's fallen in love with. And there's a very kind of emotional speech from the Doctor as the grandfather saying goodbye, seemingly forever, to his granddaughter, in as much as she has never resurfaced on the TV show. So whether she's dead, alive, or what she is remains a mystery to this day and has never been addressed. Maybe it will be in some future episode, perhaps. And it does kind of raise this question that with the Time War that was introduced in the new revived series, in which apparently we were led to believe for a number of years every single Time Lord, aside from the Doctor, had been destroyed. Did that include Susan, who, as far as we know, would have been living on Earth, in as much as we're never told she at any point had gone back to Gallifrey. So would that have affected Time Lords who weren't on Gallifrey when the Time War took place and seemingly Gallifrey was destroyed? We don't know. Maybe that one will be answered one day. But it gives her character more depth, more interest, more quality. The Doctor and, well, I'm going to say the rest of his team, not Barbara, who stays aboard the spaceship, Apparently the actress playing Barbara was off on holiday, which is why she doesn't appear in a couple of episodes in the middle of this adventure arc. But the rest of them, they go down to the Sensphere and they have various adventures there. And it transpires that in the aftermath of the arrival of the first batch of humans, a plague has been spreading on the Sensphere and has killed off no end of people. Again, a bit of a spoiler, it eventually transpires that the plague is not actually a plague at all. It's rather a case of mass poisoning. So it's not a disease or a virus brought by the humans, because that does have echoes to the whole kind of, the arrival of Europeans in the Americas and the spreading of smallpox and various other diseases that the native Indian population of America had no natural resistance to because they'd been isolated from Europe and other parts of the world for such an enormously long period of time. So there was a sort of a hint of that going on. Had the humans brought coughs and colds and viruses and plagues that were wiping out the Sensorites? Well, it turns out that no. What has happened is that the very first spaceship that looked, well, it did blow up, but the assumption was all of the humans were on board the spaceship when it blew up. Turns out they weren't. Some of them were hiding away in the dark nether regions of the Sensphere, in parts of the planet where the Sensorites won't go because it's so dark and they can't see in the dark. And the Sensorites are convinced that there are monsters living in the dark. And they kind of are, except the monsters in this case are human. And that's something that in new Doctor Who, revived Doctor Who, they've kind of gone back to that idea in which quite often it turns out that the real villains of a piece are not the weird-looking aliens with tentacles and what have you, but are the humans. So it's kind of a theme that's been picked up on again, but those that have been touched on there. And it's this band of humans hiding away in the darkness who have been poisoning the water supply with belladonna. Why on earth they turned up with gallons of belladonna on them in the first place to tip into the water supply is never entirely clear, but they had for some reason that we'll gloss over. And they've been poisoning off different aquifers. And so this apparent plague has been cropping up where people in one part of the city who drink from one water supply, those Sensorites are getting ill and dying, but other Sensorites in other areas of the cities drinking from other aquifers are not, and then the humans go and poison a different aquifer, and it kind of goes around, which is why they have thought it was a virus rather than anything else. The very posh Sensorites, the ones higher up the social hierarchy, have their own special water supply of this sort of crystal clear water which has never been poisoned, so they're okay. And the Doctor, with a bit of tinkering in a Sensorite laboratory, identifies what the poison is and works on producing antidotes so that people like Ian who have fallen ill from drinking the manky water, poisoned water, can be saved. Amidst all of this, not only have you got the dodgy humans in the darkness, but you've also got the city controller, who is one of the Sensorites, none of whom are referred to by names. It's always first Sensorite, second Sensorite, third Sensorite. They're referred to by job titles and things like that, rather than being called Fred or Gladys or whatever Sensorite names might happen to be. Well, probably not Gladys, given the gender weirdness, but anyway. One of the Sensorites is a bit of a villain. He despises humans, can understand that under the circumstances, given what's happened to their planet. But he also despises the current elder, who is like the leader of Sensorite society, and wants to replace him, feels that elder is too sympathetic to the humans, and they need somebody who's more warlike, stronger, i.e. himself, who'll stand up and resist the corrupting influence of these humans. There's an odd little bit where the Doctor says "we humans," which I presume is something that kind of slipped past the script writers or the script editors at any rate, because of course he shouldn't be referring to himself and Susan as humans, but there we go. So there's a bit of a kind of a political skullduggery going on as the city controller whips up his cronies to try and not only kill off the humans but kill off the elder and replace him and get up to all sorts of nonsense and shenanigans. And there's a slightly weird point where one of the humans off the spaceship says, well, all you Sensorites, you all look alike. which I suspect is not something that would have be heard said in New Who, because it's obviously got some kind of ironic racial overtones there. But this is 1964, and people said things like that. And even the Sensorites then turn around and go, well, oh yes, we do a bit, don't we? And from a distance, they can't always tell one Sensorite from another Sensorite, because they'll wear different sashes and what have you on their costumes to indicate their rank. And so they tend to recognise each other more by the rank and the insignia than facially or pheromonally or whatever, which is very odd to have a species who struggle to tell each other apart except by clothing. Kind of makes you wonder how the Sontarans cope, who are a clone race and really look alike. How does one Sontaran tell another Sontaran apart? And I don't think they've ever gone into that one in any great detail. But yes, a little bit of a weirdness. Russell T Davies took inspiration from the Sensorites when he was looking at the design of the Ood, who also have these big, huge dome foreheads and telepathic powers. Obviously, the Sensorites don't have the weird tentacle things coming out of their mouth the way the Oods do. And in David Tennant's episode, there is a reference to the fact that the Ood sphere is in the same solar system, the same section of space, as the Ood sphere and the Sense sphere are close to one another. So it's a theme that's been developed over a number of episodes. So, for example, when David Tennant and Donna are encountering the Vespiform, the giant wasp-like aliens, it transpires that they come from the same sector of space as the Zarbai, who were the huge giant ant-like creatures, and then the Menoptera, which were sort of like butterfly creatures that William Hartnell encountered. So this idea that certain sectors of space, nearby planets, that's the insect part of space, and that's the telepathic part of space, and somewhere else you've got the bit of space where all the weird lizard things come from, or whatever, as if different sectors of space give rise to very similar sorts of species to each other, which is a curious idea, and it's something interesting to explore perhaps in future episodes of Doctor Who as to why that should be so. It's one of a nice episode of the Sensorites. I mean, it's not the most fast-paced or cracking of adventures. It's a gentle one. It's very 60s in style. But it ends on a peaceful note that there is resolution and harmony and everything sorts out in, as Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor might have said, everyone lives. By the end of it, it's rather than guts and gore and people being blasted left, right and centre, the problems are resolved, the political shenanigans, a resolution is found to them. And the sense sphere is protected, or at least appears to be protected, maybe rather naively, from rampant human greed and exploitation. I suspect in reality that would not have lasted very long before the mining corporations would have been turning up with gunships. And you'd have had some kind of intergalactic echo of the opium wars between Britain and China, where suddenly let's go and create a market and get rich quick and blow up anyone who tries to get in our way of doing so. But that therein is another story. But it's a lovely episode, and if you like gentler TV and you enjoy black and white TV as I do, black and white films in general, which I like quite a lot of them, then I would recommend the Sensorites. You'll enjoy it. If you like faster space stuff, maybe give it a skip, but those of a certain generation I would recommend it for. Thank you.